Hermitage, Northern Virginia, a home here for us folks and friends and neighbors. This is not being done for any gain or profit. It's being done for our pleasure and enjoyment. One more time, just for the fun of it, Notes from Fair Acres by Effie Leland Wilder, Chapter 15. Around the tree, December 18th. We came together in the dining room tonight to trim the Christmas tree. I wonder why they call it trimming. Our two program directors welcomed us and said, with Arthur's help, they had found the large symmetrical live tree. We were glad about not using one of those home's artificial plastic trees. The phrase took me back to those wonderful December days when I could go to my father to cut the tree on our cousin's farm. It was a nice crowd for the evening, including Luli. An aide brought her in a wheelchair and rolled her up beside me. I'm not sure how much of the festivities she took in. She's not like she used to be, but she's in no pain. I believe my dear friend is just worn out. Yeah, it's one of those days. We opened by singing, "O come, O ye faithful, joyful and triumphant." Then Lorraine asked us to bring up our ornaments one at a time. All of us were hesitant. Nobody wanted to be first, it seemed. In fact, I'm not sure anybody wanted to go up. Then, to our surprise, Henry Holston got up. Henry came up here about 3 years ago with his wife, who soon turned funny, as they used to say, and was in the healthcare center. Not long after that, Henry, who seemed lost, began to do the same. He lives in his apartment, but these days are not always like they used to be. But here he was, going to the front. He carried two objects tied to the tree, wrapped around with tinsel. He held the objects up. The ladies said to bring something we love to put on the tree. Well, these are my bedroom slippers. I love them. They feel good. They fit in my toes just right. I want to hang them on the tree. And he did, placing the string across a lip. I saw Lurley and Sophie look at each other in dismay. That wasn't exactly what they had envisioned. However, they rose to the occasion, though. "Thank you, Mr. Holston," said Sophie, not cracking a smile. "You're welcome," he said, seeming very pleased. One of the men sang out, "What are you going to do for slippers, Henry?" "I'll manage," he said, sitting down and smiling. Oh, the intricacies these days. We're met with examples down here that could fill a whole new textbook from our experiences here. But I'm not going to write that one. I was struck with the fact there was no tittering as the old gentleman sat down. There's much kindness in him. I see it on all sides from everybody else. We speak of TLC, tender loving care. I also like to speak of P&K, patience and kindness. Sophie turned to me, a tiny trace of desperation in her voice. "Miss Hattie, do you have something for us?" I made my way to the front, holding my tissue wrapped ornament. I can't believe I've kept this for 75 years. It's a little beat up now, but it still has meaning for me. For 3 summers when I was a youngster, 11, 12, and 13, my parents sent me to a girls' summer camp high in North Carolina's topography. A place called Little Switzerland, nestled in the tip-top of the Blue Ridge Mountains. My little tent mate was miserable, a sandlapper from lower South Carolina. She said the mountains scared her. I loved them. To me, they weren't brooding, just majestic and mysterious. The village of Little Switzerland consisted of a country store, a tiny post office, an inn, and a church. It was 2 miles from camp, and we were allowed to walk to the store on Saturday afternoons. Amid the conglomeration in the store, washtubs, bolts of cloth, harnesses, barrels of apples, lanterns, etc., there was one thing that interested me and caught my eye: the candy counter. There was no choice at the candy counter, just Hershey bars. Fortunately, we liked Hershey bars. Do you know what Hershey bars are made of, I asked? Yep. Aren't you going to get some more? Nope. Why not? They sell out too fast, he said. It happened, I'll swear to it. But that day, while wandering across the store dejectedly, I spied something unusual on the counter, this little wreath. I unwrapped the tissue and I held it up. As in you can see, it's made of small leather hearts, stuffed and strung together. Between each two hearts is a cluster of bees. The bees are berries, I think, painted over heavily in bright red. It intrigued me, and I asked the proprietor who made it. There's a family of Indians that live a few miles from here. One of their girls made that and asked me to sell it for her. It's $2. I had that much in my allowance, and now I didn't even have any candy bars to spend it on. So I bought the brief. The wreath. It has been on every tree I've had, every Christmas since then. I handle it with care and think of the Indian girl who cut up and stuffed the leather hearts and painted the beads. I do hope that she had some fun with her $2. I hung the little wreath lovingly on the tree. Cora Hunter went to the front next, holding up a shiny object by a silver chain hanging. It consisted of 3 small crystal angels. Each angel held to the chain with one hand while the other clutched a tiny heart. Cora held it up. It was lovely. If I tell you the story of this ornament, you will know how old I am. Oh well, what the heck. It was 1919, and I was 6 years old. A lady on our street, a widow named Mrs. Preston, bought a car and learned to drive it. 2 unusual things for women to do in our little town at that time. Editorial note: my tongue is twisting, and that's me. Someone would yell, "She's coming by," and we would dash to the front yard to watch the car creep by, with Mrs. Preston stiff-armed at the steering wheel. I don't think she ever went more than 8 miles an hour. She called it the limousine, and I guess it was, but looked more like a glassed-in box, straight up and down. She could have bought a touring car, but instead she bought the fanciest job Ford made at the time. It even had faces on the walls for flowers, which she kept filled, and tiny window shades with fringe. Editorial note: yeah, my tongue's still twisted. That'd be me reading. Since Mrs. Preston lived just 2 doors from us, and since she seemed lonely, I would go to see her sometimes. I kept hoping she would take me for a trip to ride in her grand car, but I think she was afraid of the responsibility. One Christmas she gave me this lovely thing. Cora held it up to the light. It tinkled as she shook it. Mrs. Preston said she bought it to hang in a window on the limousine, but decided that the roughness of her started and stopping might break it. So she wanted me to hang it on our tree and enjoy it and keep it. Oh, I've enjoyed this so much every single year. Some of you here have seen it on my tiny artificial tree in my room. I will try to find a safe place for it here. And please, please, don't anybody shake the tree. She hung her little angels in a secluded spot on the tree. And we gave Cora and her treasured ornament a big band. We clapped and applauded. Grand McKnight walked up closer to the tree and held up a bag from which he took a small, well-worn book. This is the first book I ever found under a Christmas tree with my name on it. There were many more in the latter years, but I can remember the thrill of getting this first one inscribed to me. It's The Wizard of Oz, and I was 8 years old that Christmas. About a year later, my mother took me to the library and got me a card that opened the road to Treasure Island, the Rover Boys, Tom Sawyer, and all the other magical people and places. But this was the very first book of my own. I treasured it through the years, partly because of my mother's handwritten message in the front, be happy to see it on our tree. We clapped as she placed the little beloved volume between two lemons. He did well. Rosie and Louise took us all back to our childhoods with the chains they had made. They had colored sheets of notepaper with red and green crayons, cut the paper into strips, and pasted the strips around each other in two long chains. They placed the chains lovingly on the tree. Then Sydney and Retta offered their contribution, a basket full of something fluffy and white, a popcorn chain. We popped corn in our microwave, said Sydney, and spent last night stringing the kernels together. It was fun, said Retta. Took me back about 95 years. They draped their handiwork proudly around the tree. Somebody, I can't remember who, added a wreath they had made out of procanthia berries. Someone else added several cups, handmade from gold paper and filled with candy. Then came Bill Nixon with one of the best ideas of all. He said, I remember we always had live candles on our tree. My father lit them every Christmas morning, and I can't remember how big-eyed we were at the sight. He always kept a lot of buckets of water close by. I had trouble locating these candle holders, but I finally found some at an antique store in Charleston and found these candles at Walmart. As you can see, I did bring 2 buckets of waters just in case. Lurleen and Sophie helped him clamp the candle holders to limbs around the tree and helped to light the candles. When we turned off the overhead lights, a chorus of ooh, ah, how lovely went up. I saw some tears on some cheeks, especially after we sang Silent Night very softly. We sang one verse, it came upon a midnight clear. Nobody would remember the other verses, but after we broke up and went to our rooms, I looked up that carol in the hymn book. I knew there were some lines in it that applied to people under stress, including the very real stress that my aged, aching friends and I were trying to bear up under. I found the verse. And ye beneath life's crushing load, whose forms are bending low, who toil among the climbing way with painful steps and slow. Look now, for glad and golden hours come swiftly on the tongue. A rest beside the weary road and hear the angels sing. December the 20th. There is a song heard this season that really gets under my skin. I was inspired to write the following. Too oft occurring carol. I love the Yule season until, hey, he come, that drum-beating boy with his rump-a-bump-a-bump. The song's gentle messages is quite overcome, but that monotonous rump-a-pum-pum. Yeah. I wish that nice boy with his tired of rump-a-pum-pum and pum-pum had studied the lyre instead of the drum. December the 27th. Another lovely Christmas, dear diary, with a house full of my descendants. I am blessed. December 30th. Several of us are trying to plan a do of some kind for tomorrow night, New Year's Eve. But I don't believe many of the residents can stay awake till midnight. We may have to change the hands on the big wall a little to make it look like midnight. Just an editorial note, as I made those pauses and twisted songs to see if you were paying attention. Not quite. Anyway, this is the end of chapter 15.